I think maybe it's not really, it can't really happen. So I think we should start. The other members will be joining in while we move forward. So can everyone see my VS Code?
Yeah, but you can try to adjust the font size of your VS Code because the font size is too low, too small.
Yeah. What about now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Good. So for the members who have decided to join in, welcome and thank you for being part of this. Today we are learning about our CSS. So CSS in full stands for Cascading Style Sheet. So if you've never done web development before, I know you're probably wondering what is CSS and why do we need it. Now in the previous tutorials you've learned about HTML, and maybe when you were starting HTML, the instructor gave you the instructor gave you the fact that the web is made up of fundamentally three pieces. We have HTML, we have CSS, and then you have JavaScript. So those are the basic elements of any web page, or rather those are the tools that we use to build websites: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All these other tools that you hear, React.js, Vue.js, Tailwind, whatever, they all branch from this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We even have another one called HTMX, and as I've told you, they all just come from one thing, and that from these three things, and those are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, HTML is used to provide the structure of a web page. Now, if you look, for example, if maybe we try to come up with an analogy, let's say maybe you're building a house. HTML will be, just placing the stones and then doing the roofing and all of that. And yeah, that is basically it. HTML is just used to lay for it is just used to lay foundation for our web pages, and just telling our web page that I will have this element here, we'll have maybe a title here, we'll have this and all of that. And then CSS is what we use to style HTML. Maybe you've visited a site and you've seen it having this beautiful animation, beautiful transitions, and all of that, and that is because of CSS. And then now we have the third piece, which is JavaScript. We are not covering JavaScript today, but JavaScript is what we use to add functionality to our web pages. Now, in our building a house analogy, CSS will be us, painting our house, adding windows to our house, painting the floor, putting all those fancy window panes and all of those things, putting carpets, curtains. That will be CSS because you're just using to make everything beautiful. And then JavaScript is what we use to add functionality to our sites. Every time you click a button and something happens, it is because of JavaScript. So even in a house scenario, JavaScript will be what, maybe let's say your ability to put on and put off a switch, your ability to use a lift or an elevator. That is essentially JavaScript. So that was just me giving you the reason why we need HTML, why we need CSS, and why we need JavaScript. So particularly in this tutorial, we'll be talking about CSS. So CSS in full stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and this is what we use to style our elements in HTML. Now, I've opened up my VS Code, and you can see I have one index.html file here. And if I just open up my my browser output, you can see this is what is being rendered by that HTML document. So maybe let me go back to my VS Code, and let us start working on CSS. Now, how do you style elements in CSS? So let me just try to write this as we go on. Now, we have three ways of styling elements in CSS. The first way is using the style attribute. The second method is using the style tags, and then the third and the most preferred way is to use an external style sheet. So let me just put them here as comments. So ways of writing CSS. So the first one is using the style attribute, and you are looking at that in a short moment. The second one is using the style tags, and then the third one is using an external CSS file. And this is what we usually recommend because it has an organization layer to your code base, and it makes everything nicely organized and all of that. Now let us go to this first way, using the style attribute. Now, how do you use this style attribute to style an element in HTML? Now, maybe when you're learning about HTML, the instructor told you that attributes are just what we use to attributes are pieces of information that add more information about an element in a page, or rather adding more functionality to an element in a page. And one of the attributes we can use in HTML is the style attribute, which we use to style an element in HTML. So if I come here and just say style, for example, and then maybe give this thing color red, so that is me using the style attribute to style this particular element, using CSS. So whatever we've done here, this is CSS we've written. So congratulations, you've wrote your first, your first CSS code. And I recommend that you guys code along with me. I'll try my best to stick to your pace. So, for example, I'm putting here style is equals to color red, and when I look at this in my browser, I should be able to see this text having a red color. So let me just open my output and then refresh my page, and you can see this text over here using the style attribute. It is red in color. Can you guys confirm you can see my screen over my browser over here? Dennis,
Yeah,
Brian. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if I
yeah,
should cut. Okay, if I put them side by side this way, is this okay?
yeah, I think it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. So this is us using the internal using this style attribute to style our element. So maybe I can give this other one style. Maybe give it a color property set to green. Green. Okay, I'm sorry, color green, and then maybe come to this one and give it a style. Maybe let's say color magenta. So when I come and refresh my page, you can see this one has a green color, this one has a magenta color, and this one has a red color. So I can add more styles. For example, I can come here, maybe put a semicolon. So whenever I want to add a new style, I just put a semicolon and then supply my style over there. For example, I can just say border 3 pixels solid red. Now, when I come in, refresh my page, you can see that element is having a border of 3 pixels solid red. Now, there is a very huge problem associated to this. Of course, we have use cases where you can just use the style attribute, but you can imagine when an element is having, let's say, 15 styles, because that actually happens. When you start doing, some advanced CSS stylings and all of that, you find one element can have up to, let's say, even 20 styles. And, putting 20 styles inside this style attribute, it will quickly make our code to be clumsy, very hard to read, and very hard to manage. So this is why this is usually not recommended, using this style attribute to style your elements. It is usually not recommended, but definitely we have use cases for that. Maybe if your element is only accepting this color attribute, maybe you only want to give color to your element, or maybe just one or two styles, then that would be a perfect use case for using these style attributes. But you can imagine when our element wants like 15 properties or something, then it makes it very, very hard to put all of them here and still maintain the readability of our code. So this is where the second methodology of styling our element comes in, and that is using the style attribute inside the head tags. So what I can just do, I'll come inside, come here inside the head attribute. You can see the head is starting and ending here, and then I just put the style tags. So style, and then close that style tag, and then inside these tags, I put whatever styles I want. Now, how do you write that CSS? So this is the syntax. We usually use selector. Okay, let me just write this here. Selector, and then you put a full colon, and then you open and close. Curly brace. So this is what we call a curly brace. I don't know what you call it, but this squiggly brackets over here. And then Inside these curly braces, you put your styles in terms of property and value. So for example, our color is the property, and then red is the value. Border is the property, and then 3 pixels solid red is the value. So for example, if you just say color, red, then the element, this element over here, whatever element we have selected using this particular selector, will have that red color. Now, if this concept of selectors is this concept of selector is not making sense right now, don't worry. We are coming to that in a very short while. So, for example, let's say I want to style all the p or rather all the paragraphs to have this color, red, and then a border to be 3 pixels solid red. So let me just delete these style attributes, or we can just leave them as well. Let me just come up here with a new paragraph. So let me just say here, this paragraph is styled with style tags. So this paragraph is styled with style tags. Now, okay, instead of making it a paragraph, let me just use okay, allow me to just increase the size of our VS Code. Now I want to put, instead of p tags, let me just use maybe let me just use h6. And I'll tell you the reason for that. Now, you can see I've changed the H6, and it has also changed the automatically to H6. It is because I'm using a VS Code plugin for, auto-completing those tags. So this is not a paragraph. Let me just say this H6 is styled with style tags. So this selector here, I'll just come in and put here a H6, and then color red, and then okay, sorry, we don't put this colon over here. I'm sorry, I've confused that with something else. You just put the selector, and then you open and close those squiggly brackets, and then write your styles inside here. So this is my H6 having a color of red. So when I come and refresh over here, you can see a H6 coming over here with that color being red. And the H6 is very small, so let us just make that font size to be bigger. And the property for increasing the font size of our elements in CSS, it's called font size. It's actually called font size. Spoiler there. So 24 pixels. Let me just use 24 pixels. And when I refresh that, you can see the font size of our element has increased. So essentially, what you're telling our HTML, or rather what you're telling our CSS, is to go inside our HTML, and any element that has that is this H6 should have this property, color being red, and then the font size being 24 pixels. And maybe to just prove that to you, I can add here another H6 tag, and maybe let's say yet another H6 tag styled with style tags. Now, they're not really called style tags, it's called internal CSS. So let me just say here, internal CSS. I was kind of loading that name, internal CSS. So this is what we call internal CSS. So I've told you we have these three ways of styling our elements. The first one is using the style tags. The second one is using this internal CSS. And then the third, okay, let me first of all refresh this one over here. And you can see yet another H6 tag style with internal CSS. Maybe let me just add a border. Let me just give them a border, maybe let's say 3 pixels, solid magenta. And when I refresh this, you can see both of them are having that border of 3 pixels solid magenta. And it is because we are telling our CSS that anything that is H6 inside this HTML should have these styles applied to them. So those are the two ways of styling your elements. Now the third and the most preferred way, which is also the way that you guys will prefer very soon, is to use an external CSS file. Now, whenever we are coding, we usually want to organize our code. Essentially, that is what you always want to do. Which means anytime you maybe want to include Python in your code, you create a file for it. If you want to include JavaScript in your code, you create a file for it. It doesn't matter whether maybe you're just writing a single line of JavaScript, or maybe 2 lines, or whatever number of lines of JavaScript or Python or whatever. It is usually advisable to just organize everything and just have that hierarchy of organization. And this is why we are going to create an external CSS file, and that CSS file is going to, include all our stylings for these elements. So let me just create a styles.css file. Now you can name this file whatever you want. You can even call it your name. Just make sure it ends with this .css. So if maybe you've decided to name your file Dennis, make sure it's dennis.css. If you've decided to name your file, let's say my app, just make sure it's my app.css. And then once I'm done with that, I can just press enter. Now, to get started, I'll just remove this H6 stylings over here. Let me just cut that, because I know that we all now understand that we can use the style tags inside the head tag to style our elements. And then let me just refresh my page, and you can see we've lost those stylings over here, in that our elements don't have that style anymore. So let me just come to my CSS and then paste that code here. Now, once I've pasted that code there, let me come to my file and refresh it, and you can see we are not getting that styling here. We are not getting this red color to these H6 elements. We're not getting this font size of 24 pixels, and you're not getting this border of 3 pixels solid magenta. And maybe you're asking why. And the reason is because we need to tell HTML which CSS file we are using. Now, how do we do that? Okay, let me just delete these style tags. I know you guys you've already understood, or maybe you've taken note of using that style tag. Now, how do we tell HTML to use this CSS file to style these elements? Well, we use a tag called the link tag. So this is the syntax for the link tag: link, and then rel is equals to style sheet. Make sure you include this line, because we are just telling the relationship of this link to this particular file. So how is it related to this file? And it is a style sheet. And then the href is the name of our CSS file. Now, right now I'm just telling you it is the name of our CSS file, but in an interview situation, please don't say it's the name of our CSS file. Well, right now we're just telling you it is the name of the name of the CSS file, to just keep things simple and to avoid complicating things. But essentially what we usually put here is the path to our CSS file. So whenever you're inside an interview and somebody tells you to explain the purpose of this href attribute when using link rel is equals to style sheet, tell them that href attribute, you supply there the location, or rather the path to your CSS file. Now my CSS file is located in the same directory with my HTML file, and that is where I'll just type it directly here, styles.css. If maybe I have a folder for for my CSS files, which is again recommended, then I'll maybe come here and say folder name / the name of my CSS file. Now, when I do that, now we've linked this styles.css file with this index.html file. And right now, when I now come and refresh my page, you can see we are now getting back those stylings that we had. And it's because we've linked this CSS file with this HTML file. And essentially, that is just it. And this is what you guys should be using. So whenever maybe you're given, we give you an assignment to do maybe a simple web app or whatever, make sure the styling that, or rather the styles that you're using, they're external. You're using an external CSS file. The one thing that you should always avoid at all costs is using these style attributes over here, because as I've told you, when you are when your styles start growing, to be more and more and more, then it becomes too cumbersome, and it makes it to be very unreadable. So that is the reason why I'm just going to delete these style tags over here, and then also delete this one over here, and then maybe let me just leave this one for anyone who wants to just see how this works. So that, and maintain a black color, so that we just stick to whatever we have over here. So p style is equals to color black. It's okay because you're just using one style, but the moment you see you're going beyond one style, then it means it's time to either use the style attributes or use an external CSS file. And again, using the style attributes is not really advisable, so definitely go for this external CSS file. And whenever you use an external CSS file, most beginners forget to include that inside your HTML. you need to tell your HTML file which CSS file to use in styling this document, and this is how we do it. And then inside this href, you supply the path to your CSS file. Let me also delete this. Maybe for those who are coming in, let me just go over this quickly one more time. So we use CSS to style our HTML elements, and we have 3 ways of writing CSS. The first one is using the style attribute, which is what you see over here. The second one is using the style tags, or rather what we call internal CSS, and that is what you'd see most people using style here, and then all the properties and declarations inside that between these style attributes. And then the third, which is the most recommended one, is using an external CSS file. And this is essentially what you're doing. And I've told you guys, whenever you're using an external CSS file, make sure you include you remember to tell your HTML which CSS file that is, and this is how we do it. Just use link del is equals to style sheet href is equals to the path to your CSS file. Now, one last thing before we move on to the next concept is that you can actually have more than one CSS file in your HTML. So maybe I can just come in. Let's say I have stylings for my, let's say, home page. I can just say here home.css. I don't know if we really have stylings for a home page, but I'm just trying to put a point home here. Now link rel is equal to style sheet. I can just come in and say home.css, and yeah, that's what I'm essentially trying to say. We can have more than one. We can have more than one CSS files. Styling our HTML. So maybe to just show you this is working, let me style this h2 using this home.css, and I can just come here and say maybe h2, and then maybe give it let's say font size of maybe, let's say, 36 pixels. So when I come here and refresh this, you can see now my h2 is having that huge font size of 36 pixels. However, I don't advise you guys having multiple CSS files inside your HTML. Right now, because most of you are maybe beginners, you won't understand the reason why. But I see people here who maybe who can explain this reason to you. The reason as to why you should not be using multiple CSS files inside your HTML. Okay, let me just throw that away. It is because you're increasing more items to be loaded by your browser whenever a user visits your page. Because you see, when a user visits a particular page, the HTML is loaded, and then the browser starts looking for where the CSS files are, and then starts styling those elements. And you see, when you're using a lot of CSS files, then you're increasing the number of items that the browser should load, and that makes your web page to be very, very, very slow. So it is highly recommended that you use one CSS file. And if you think you're using, if you want to use multiple CSS files, then okay, don't want to complicate things, but if you want to use multiple CSS files, I want you guys to look into the concept of using is it called a CSS compiler or something? Essentially, you usually write CSS in multiple files, and then whenever we usually compile that CSS, but that is advanced CSS. You won't be doing that right now, so don't worry. And then it is written to one CSS file, which is actually compressed, and then that is the only CSS file that you usually include here. So right now you don't have to master or understand any of that. You will cross the bridge when you get there. Just understand for now that to make your page load faster, or rather one of your ways, that is not how you make your page load faster. One of your ways to make your page load faster is to reduce the number of items which have to be loaded by your browser. And one of those items that you should do, one of those items which you should reduce the number of is your CSS files. So for that reason, I'm just going to remove this home.css. Now, if there is any question, you can just drop it in the chat box, and then Dennis or Brian or Kevin will bring my attention to it, and then I will be moving. I'll be answering that question as we move forward. So let me now go to my sites.css. Now, when you have decided, well, now we've told you that you're supposed to be using external CSS files to style to style your CSS elements. So this is the syntax that we usually use to select elements and then style them inside our CSS files. So this H6 is what we call a selector. And then once you have this selector, then you use curly braces to supply all the styles to, all elements that match that particular selector. For example, right now, any element that is H6 will be having this color red, font size 24 pixels, and this border 3 pixels solid magenta. Now, that brings us to our next topic, which is CSS selectors. So let me just have a H2 here, CSS selectors. Now we have three primary selectors. The first selector is what we call a class selector, and this selector is used to select multiple elements. So if this is not making sense, don't worry. I'm explaining it in a few. And then the second one is the ID selector. The ID selector, which is used for a single element. And then the third one is the element selector. So essentially, we've already used the element selector. When we use this H6 over here, that was an element selector. But don't worry, we are still coming back to that. So let us, what are these selectors? I know you're asking yourself. Essentially, the name actually describes itself. That is what we use to identify an element that we want to style. So selectors, let me just have that here. Selectors, they are used to identify the elements that we want to style. So selectors are used to identify the elements that we want to style. And I've told you that we have three types of selectors. The first one is the class selector. The second one is the ID selector. And then the third one is the element selector. So this class selector is used to select multiple elements. Now, how do you use this class selector? I can just come here to my paragraph and just give it a class. You can see the syntax we're using to assign, these classes to our elements. Now, if I come here and say, for example, this paragraph having a class of, let's say, paragraph, let me just say para instead of, using that paragraph name. If I, for example, come here and say this P class is equals to para, you can see this is how we assign this class to this particular element. So P class is equals to para. I can now take this para and then come to my CSS and then use it to style to style that particular element. So how do you tell CSS that this is a class selector? You use a dot and then followed by that particular class name, which in this case is this para over here. So let me just style this. I can, for example, come in and say border 3 pixels solid red. So I know we are just using borders and color and font size, but we'll be learning more CSS properties as we go forward. So right now, for example, you can see I'm using this para, which is a class inside my HTML, and my CSS will know that this para is a class because I'm using this dot before it. So when I come to my CSS and refresh that, you can see this element is getting that styling of this border being 3 pixels solid red. I've told you that this class selector is used to select multiple elements. So I can also come to this element over here and give it a class, para, and also come to this element. Okay, that one has a class already. I can come to this and this, and okay, it doesn't have a class. It just has a style. I don't want to complicate it. Let me just come to this other one. P class is equals to para, and essentially all elements that have this class of para, and para, they will have this border being 3 pixels solid red. And when I refresh that, you can see that actually works. So that is the first way of selecting our elements using the class selector, which is used to select multiple elements. The second one is is called the ID selector, which is used for selecting a single element. That being said, it means we can only use an ID once inside our HTML file. Now, the way that I usually like to understand this is that I just tell myself that even in a country or rather in a school, one ID number, is used to identify one person. No two people cannot have the same ID number. So anytime you see the class selector and the ID selector confusing you, just remember that the ID selector is used for selecting a single element, and use that analogy of one person in a country having a single ID number which cannot be used by anyone else. So how do you use this ID selector? You've already guessed it. I can just come here and say ID is equals to, let's say, paragraph. Yeah, let me just use ID is equal to paragraph. Now, how can I style based off this ID inside my CSS? So let me just copy my my ID over there. Now, coming back to my CSS, to CSS will know that this is an ID because I'm going to use this hash symbol. So whenever you put this hash symbol, it means that you want to style an ID. So when I put that ID of that text over there, so this is our CSS now knows that there is a single element inside our HTML with the ID being paragraph, and it knows that because of this hash symbol. And inside this here, our CSS knows that inside our HTML, we have a number of elements with this para class, and it knows this is a class because of this dot over here. Now, let me just style this ID. Let me just give it a border, the good old border we are used to, maybe 5 pixels solid orange. Or okay, orange is also a good color. Let me just come and refresh it here, and you can see we have that orange color. Robert, please stop presenting a screen because we're seeing something else here. Okay, back to this. You can see this element with this ID paragraph. It is having this border of 5 pixels, solid orange, and that is what you guys are seeing here. So coming back to my HTML, that is what I'm telling you guys. This is it over here. So ID is equals to paragraph, and I've told you that ID can only be used for one element. No two elements can ever have the same ID. But for classes, multiple elements can share the same class attribute. Now, the last but not least is this element selector. Now, the element selector, it's actually used to select all those particular elements. For example, right here when I said H6, this is the element selector, which means any element with this H6 whatever, or rather any H6 element will have these styles applied to it. Any H6 element will have those styles applied to it. That is it as far as selectors are concerned. If anyone has any question, please ask. Okay, I'm forgetting one selector, and that is what we call the universal selector. I'm very sorry, guys. So let me just put this P here, the universal selector. So this universal selector is used to select all the elements inside our page. So if I come here and just say, okay, how do you use universal selector? Now you guys are according to what we've learned here, you're already used to the fact that if you want to use for example, a class selector, you have to say class is equals to para. If you want to use an ID paragraph, you have to say ID is equals to your ID, or class is equals to the class name that you want. But for universal selector, it's a bit different. We just use this star over here. So the moment you use this star, you've actually selected everything inside your HTML page. And I mean it's absolutely everything you've selected. Now, once I do that, I can, for example, come here and say, let's say, font family. Okay, this is another styling, or rather, it's another style I'm showing you. So let me just pick here Franklin Gothic medium and all of that, and then just delete all of this garbage up to here. Yeah. So I'm selecting all the elements and I'm giving them this font family, Franklin Gothic medium or whatever. I don't even know what this font family is, but let us just refresh our page and see. So you can see the font, our font has changed. We are now using this font here, and it has actually selected all the elements inside our page. All the elements are having this, that Franklin Gothic medium font over there. And that is because you're using the element selector, and you're using it to, select everything inside our HTML file. or rather selecting everything inside our HTML. Now, let me give you one pointer. We only have one use case for this universal selector, and it should be avoided at all times for all other cases, because it will end up giving you unexpected behavior. Don't Most of you maybe will be tempted, you'll be lazy because you don't want to maybe give your element a class and come here and style it. So you'll just come here and just select everything and give it a font family of, Franklin Gothic Medium. But remember, when you add something else, then it means it's going to have that particular font family, which is Franklin Gothic Medium. And maybe you don't want it to have that particular font. Maybe it's a heading, and so you want to use maybe, let's say, Times New Romans or something, but it's going to have this font family because you selected everything and gave it this property of font family being this Franklin thing over here. Now, I'm going to give you only one use case for this universal selector, and that is the only time you should be using this universal selector. And let me just actually give you a spoiler. It is used to do what we call global resetting. We'll be looking at global resetting shortly, but for now, just understand the fact that this universal selector should be avoided at all times, and except for that use case, which means that once you've used it once, maybe on top of your page here, don't use it anywhere else unless you are very sure, you are very, very, very sure that you want to use it, or else it's going to give you unexpected behaviors. Now, this is actually not the end of selecting HTML elements, because we don't have enough time, or rather we don't have time for going through, or rather going through selectors, in details. I'd encourage you guys to go and look at, nesting selectors. For example, you'll see people doing dot para, and then maybe let's say first child. This is also a selector using, pseudo selectors and all of that. But these are the primary selectors that you'll be needing. I want you guys to go and look at the concept of pseudo selectors. We also have another selector. Remember, I told you these are the primary selectors that we have, but we have this other one here called pseudo selectors and pseudo selectors. And I want you guys to go and research on these pseudo selectors, because we don't have time to look at them in this particular session. And then I also want you guys to go and look at nesting selectors. This is also something that people do a lot in CSS. You'll see people doing, for example, let's say hash paragraph and then .id pa, maybe span. So this is what we call nesting selectors. Sometimes you'll see them doing this and all of that. Just at your own free time. They're not really challenging, and I'd recommend that at your own free time you go and look at these two things over here: pseudo selectors and nesting selectors. So, do we have any question as far as selectors in CSS are concerned? If you have any question, please raise your hand and unmute. Good. We don't have any questions. So let us go to the next thing, and that is the property value syntax of CSS. Now, this is how actually we write CSS: property and a value. So the property, this is what is inbuilt into CSS, and then the value is now what we what we use to complete that particular property. For example, color is the property, and then red is the value. Font size is the property inbuilt in CSS, and then 24 pixels is the value describing that particular property. And then border is a property. 3 pixels solid magenta is the value describing that property. So this is the property value syntax of CSS, and this is actually how we write CSS, which makes CSS to be very, very easy, because that's actually all you need to know. That is the only syntax you need to know: the property value, and essentially that is all you'll be doing with CSS. Just writing a property and a value, a property and a value. For example, here, font family is the property, Franklin Gothic Medium is the value. Border is the property, 5 pixels solid orange is the value. Border, 3 pixels, border is the property, and then that thing there is the value, and so on and so forth. So that's actually all you need to know about the syntax of CSS, property, value. And then we have something called commenting. So whenever you comment your code, that particular line will be ignored. So for example, when I come to this border 3 pixels solid red and I just comment it, and to comment in VS Code, you just press Control and /, and that particular line will be commented. So this is how you write your comments in CSS. You uh, you open with this / asterisk, and then you close with this asterisk /. Yeah, and that is it. That is just how you write a comment in CSS. So when I come and refresh this thing here, okay, we don't have a H6. Let me come to this paragraph and then comment this border 3 pixels solid red. And when I refresh my page here, you will see all these borders will not be there. So when I refresh this, all those borders are gone, and it is because of this commenting thing in CSS. So that's it about commenting and all of that. So if you guys have any question, please let me know. Don't suffer in silence. Now, I want us to move to the next thing, and that is the CSS box model. CSS box model. Now, you guys, I need you to understand one thing, that everything inside HTML is just a box. If you come to look at it, this H1 is just a box that you're putting our value inside there. This H2 is just a box that you're putting a value inside there. This paragraph, it's a box that you're putting inside a value inside there, and so on and so forth. So let us just go to this H2 CSS box model. Now, the CSS box model, it is made up of 3 properties, or rather, it's made up of 3 things. The first one is what we call margin. The second one is what we call padding. The third one I'm forgetting. We have margin, we have padding. Dennis, Brian, Frecia, what is the third property apart from margin and padding? I think we'll just pick that along the way as we move forward. I think it's box sizing, so P box sizing. But I'm not sure if this is the third property, but we'll be looking at it when we will definitely get the answer before we get there. So Dennis or Brian or Frecia, you can just look it up before we get there. Now, let us start with this first property, and this first property is what we call margin, and margin is the distance from one element to another. Distance between an element and another. So distance between an element and another. So the distance, for example, from this paragraph to this paragraph, this small distance that you're seeing over here, that is what we call a margin. The distance from this point here from this text here to this text, this distance that you're seeing over here is what we call a margin. This is what we call a margin. It is just the distance from one element to another. So how do we change the margin of our elements? For example, you want this element to be way down from this one over here. So let us look for this element here called using style attribute. Using the style attribute, let me just give it an ID. Of let me just call it mag1 for maybe margin 1. And if I want it, for example, to be if I want to push the element below it to the very bottom, I can come here and just say, for example, margin that element. For example, I can just come and give it margin, and you can see we have all this value: margin top, margin bottom, margin left, margin right. So let me just come here and pick this margin bottom, and for example, let us give it a value like 24 pixels. So when I come and refresh my page over here, you can see that space has actually increased. So let me just increase this to maybe something like 74 pixels. And when I refresh this, you can see that distance is actually increasing. So that is the margin property. And as I've told you, it is just the distance from an element to the other. So the distance from this element to this one, which is what we call the margin, in this case, the margin to the bottom is 74 pixels. Now, what if I want a margin to the left over here? I'll just come here and put a margin left. Let's say maybe it's something like 20 pixels. So when I come and refresh this, you can see we've moved it 20 pixels from the left, and you can see it's no longer all the way to the left like its fellow elements. If we want to give it some margin to the right, of which in this case we'll not be able to see, margin right, we can just come and give it, let's say, something like 50 pixels, and that will also do the job. But right now we cannot see it because we don't have any elements to the right over here. We can also give it some margin to the top. Let us also give it a margin to the top of 74 pixels. Margin top, 74 pixels. And now when you refresh that, you can see that that spacing has actually increased. But you see, we are actually using a lot of properties over here. We can just use something called a shorthand. We can just come here and say margin, and the first value is apply here. We can supply 4 values: top, right, bottom, and left. So top, right, bottom, left, like a clock, the way a clock moves. Top, right, bottom, left. So if I just come here and say margin, I can supply the top value, which is 74 pixels, supply the right value, which in this case is 50 pixels, supply the bottom value, which in this case is 74 pixels, and then supply the left value, which is 20 pixels. 20 pixels. So let me just comment this and then refresh to show you that this really does the work. And you can see we are having the same effect. Now, sometimes we usually have situations where the top and the bottom have the same value. For example, top is 74 pixels and the bottom is 74 pixels. You can see the first value 74 pixels, which is the value for our top margin, and the third value, which is the value for our bottom margin, it's also 74 pixels. And it is the same case maybe with this right and left value. So right 50 pixels and the left 20 pixels. So in such situations, you don't have to also come in throwing all of these 4 values. We have another shorthand, which is to come in and say margin, and then the first value will be the value for top. For top, let me just put this top and bottom, and then the second value will be the value for left and right. So let me just come and have it here, margin. So top and bottom, maybe I can just put 74 pixels, and then left and right, maybe give it something like 50 pixels. And that will still do the job because we are supplying the value for top and bottom, and then the value for left and right. So when I refresh this, you can see we are getting that 50 pixels, and then to the top and bottom, that particular value. So essentially, when you're using two values like this, you're telling CSS that this is the margin for top and bottom, and the left and right. But when you're using 4 values, you're using that clock, that clockwise direction thing: top, right, bottom, and left. So that is all you need to know as far as the margin is concerned. So I can just comment this out. You just leave it there, and I refresh this, so that will go back to what we have. So that is it about the margin. If anyone has a question, please, you can ask. Okay, no question. So let us go to the padding. So the padding is the distance between an element, the content of an element and its border. So let me just say here, distance between the content of an element and its border. So for example, if you look at this here, for example, we have this H2 with this text over here, CSS box model, this H2 over here. So let us just give it an ID. Class is equal, okay, not a class. Let me just use an ID because it is just a single element that I want to style, and maybe give it title. So when I come to style my title over here, okay, instead of using title, can I just use pad1 or whatever, because that actually communicates what you're trying to achieve. So I can just come in and put here my value pad1, and as I've told you, the padding is the distance between the content of an element and its border. So let us just start by saying the border. I can just come in and say the border is let's say something like 8 pixels solid, let's say orange. orange. And when I refresh this, you can see I'm getting all that border over here. Now, let us just make, let us to see whatever we want to do. Let us just make this border occupy, or rather, let us just make this element occupy whatever the size of the content inside that particular element is. And how do we do that? We can just come in and say with maximum content. And now when I refresh that, if this property confuses you, don't worry, we're getting into that. So when I've done with maximum content, the width of that element is set to the maximum content of that particular element. So as I've told you, the padding, or rather padding, is the distance between the content of an element and its border. So right now we can see the distance between this content and the border is like 0. That is why you can see this content is way too stressed. It is between this element, and we don't want that. So I can just come here, for example, and say padding, maybe give it something like let's say 20 pixels. And now when I refresh this, you can see that padding has increased. I've also reduced the size of the border. That is why you can see it's a bit thin. You can see the padding has now increased. So the padding is now 20 pixels. And as I promised you, the padding is the distance between the content of an element and its border. So you can see this is the content of the element and this is the border. So the distance between this content and this border is whatever we are seeing here, 20 pixels. Now, the behavior for this padding is very, very similar to what we have here with the margin. So let me just start by commenting this out, and I can start by giving my, let us just say padding to the right of maybe, let's say, 20 pixels. So that is my padding to the right. I've removed all the other padding, and I only want the padding to the right. So when I refresh this, you can see the padding to the right here, 20 pixels. Let me just increase that so that you guys really see that you actually have a padding there. So you can see the padding, which is the distance from the content here all the way to the border, is this 40 pixels over here. You can also have the padding to the bottom, which is let us just give it something like 50 pixels. 50 pixels. And when I refresh this, I'll get that 50 pixels padding to the bottom. So as I've told you, the distance between the content and the border. Let me also add some padding to the left. Padding left. Maybe we give it something like, let us also give that padding left 40 pixels. And when I refresh my page, you can see I've now added the distance between the border and the content of this element to be that 40 pixels. I can also add the padding to the top. Let me just give it 40 pixels. Padding top, give it 50 pixels. And when I refresh it, you can see we are now achieving that. So that is our box there, and that is the padding, which is the distance between the content of the element and the border of that particular element. So the border of our element over here, which in this case is this H2. So this is our H2. The content, the border of that element is this border you are seeing over here, this orange, and then the content is this CSS box model over here. So as I've told you, the padding is the distance between this content and that border, and that is what you are having over here. So let me just comment all of this and show you this shorthand, this thing that we have over here. The fact that you can have here padding top right, bottom left, the same way we usually do, the same way a clock goes. So if I come here and supply my padding, so let us say the padding to the top is maybe 50 pixels. 50 pixels. The padding to the bottom, top, the right is 40 pixels. The bottom is 50 pixels. And then the padding to the right is 40 pixels. When I come and refresh this, we'll have the same effect because, yeah, you guys understand that, it is just the same thing. So, okay, let me just comment that and comment that. And once again, if you supply two values to your padding, if you supply two values, then the first value will be used for the top and bottom padding, which in this case will be our 50 pixels for our top and the bottom padding. And then the second value will be used for the right and left padding, which is 40 pixels. So when I come and refresh it over here, you can see we are achieving the same effect, and that is because of of that padding property over there. So if you guys have any question, please let me know as we move to the third property of the CSS box model. Please ask your questions. Okay. Then I think we are good. We don't have any questions. Now, the third thing inside our of our the third or rather the third property of our box model is actually the content, not box sizing. The content. So the content is essentially, this content actually. That's just all. That is all. That's all you need to know about the content. So content, the content of the box. For example, in this case, it is this CSS. Yes.
Excuse Dennis. I think
Yes,
the
please.
third property is border. The third property. So the border.
Yes, it's. Oh, yeah. The third property is actually the border. Okay, let me just comment this one out. The third property is the border. But you guys, we've already seen the border in action. So this is actually the border. Whatever you're seeing here, that is the border. So I don't know. I don't know how you can define a border. The line that surrounds the content. I think you can just say that this line that surrounds our content. So that is the border. So let us just quickly go through the border. So you can see here we've done border 3 pixels solid orange. You can specify you can specify the border that you want. For example, you can just come here and say border bottom 3 pixels solid orange. And when I refresh that, you can see that is the border to the bottom. Let me go border top 3 pixels solid. We can go with orange red. And when I refresh that, you can see we are having that border to the top and to the bottom. You can do the same for the left one, border left, maybe 3 pixels solid. Now I don't know what color is going to match this orange and orange red. Okay, let's just go with pink. So that is a bad idea. It doesn't match the color scheme, but it communicates the concept. You can see we now have that border to the left. And then last but not least, it's just adding the border to the right. The border to the right, let us still have 3 pixels solid. Maybe we can go with something like cyan. So bright colors over there. And you can see that is just us changing the borders how we want. And it's already making the element to look a bit beautiful. So maybe we can just reduce the padding, and let me just go with 20 pixels by 10 pixels, and when I refresh that, yeah, our element is now a bit reduced or something of that sort. So okay, let me just add this inside our small logo, whatever here, line that surrounds content. Surrounds, I think it's letter U. Yeah. So the line that surrounds the content. So that line, that is the border. So if you have any question, please ask your questions as we move to the. I see we are running out of time. Let me go to the. I don't want to call it the last thing in CSS because we have a lot to cover. Maybe we can have another session next week, because today I wanted to give you the most important things in CSS. Now, let me show you. Okay, let me show you the last thing that you guys are supposed to be doing, so that so you're supposed to be doing in your CSS to avoid weird behaviors when styling your CSS. And I want this to be like I don't know what you call it, but I want you guys to always be doing this. It should be like a spell. It should be like a spell you're casting whenever you are starting, or whenever you are writing your CSS. I don't know if you guys are understanding what I'm trying to put across here. It should be like a spell you're putting across whenever you are starting your new CSS file like this, or rather your main CSS file, and that is doing the global reset. Whenever you you have your primary CSS file like this, and you're getting started, always make sure you do the global reset. It makes you to avoid a lot of weird behaviors in styling, and makes styling to be very easy and very efficient. And that is using selecting all the elements. So using that universal selector, you select all the elements, and you start by removing all the border. So you say border, none, padding. This is us removing all the borders and the paddings. Border none, padding none. You can also use zero, border zero, and padding zero. So this none property means like just remove that particular thing. So if maybe you're using to our font size, okay, let's say maybe you're using to our border being, let's say, 3 pixels solid orange. If we put that border bottom to be none, then it will just remove that particular property. So border none, padding none, and then most important, use this property called box sizing and set it to border box. So when I refresh this, you'll see a lot of things will change inside our CSS. I want you to look at how our CSS files look, our CSS, or rather our page looks like right now. And right now I'm refreshing it. You can see all these default margins. You can see, for example, we have a weird margin over here. And for somebody who is starting out in CSS, maybe you want your header to be all the way at the top, and you don't want to use this position absolute and all of that nonsense. You will really wonder why that is happening. We'll even think it's your browser having a bug or something, but essentially it is just you've not done this global resetting. So always make sure you're using this global resetting, because it actually saves a lot of time and a lot of hassle down the way. So when I come and refresh my page over here, you will see all of this space, will be removed, and even our box, our box model will change a bit. So when I refresh that, okay, I don't know why that is not why it's not picking, but essentially, if everything goes well, I think it's because I'm zoomed in. If everything goes well on your side, this will be all the way to the top over here, and essentially all the default settings should be removed or something. And always make sure you have this inside your CSS before you do anything else. Of course, we usually have other styles coming in, but these are the primary ones. Even if you don't understand what is happening, just put them inside your CSS file. Trust me, it saves a lot of time and a lot of hassle when you go down the line, or rather when you continue with your styling or something of that sort. So always make sure you do this global resetting, whether you're removing the border, you're removing you're removing the default border, the default padding, and then you're setting the box sizing to be border box. So just make sure you're always having that. And yeah, essentially this box sizing border box is usually used to instruct CSS to include this calculation of of this border to that particular element. Normally when you tell, for example, an element to have a border of 3 pixels solid red, the border will, for example, maybe go all the way up. But when you use this box sizing to be border box, this border will be included inside here. It will essentially go inside here. But it's very hard to visualize, because even if I put a border of 3 pixels solid red over here, you won't know whether it's inside, whether it's towards the inside or whether it's towards the outside. So just make sure you have this box sizing property set to border box. Now, maybe for the remaining amount of time, we can quickly go through some properties and values. So the first property we've seen definitely is the border. So we know how to use the border. We know how to use the border bottom, border top, left, and right. And then we know how to use all of this. The second property maybe we've gone through today is the padding. And we've also learned how to use selectors and all of that. We've also looked at how to change the font size of an element using the font size property. Let us look at how we can change the color of an element using the color property. So if I just come here and say color, let's say it would be something like orange red or orange. When I refresh this, my element will be having that color property set to orange. So maybe let me show you something, guys. Let me comment all of this. Sometimes we usually want the color of this text to be the same color being used by our border or something. So in that case, if you just come here and say, for example, border, let's say 3 pixels solid, and then current color. So essentially, anytime you see current color, it is just referring to this color over here, or rather the color that has been set, the active color. Let me just say the active color. I don't want to go I don't want to use the analogy of state management or something, but it is just the current color, and that's all it is. So if I come here and refresh this, you will see our border is that orange. If I come here and put orange red, now I don't have to now come and change it here manually, or also say that the border of this is 3 pixels or in current color, whatever. If I just come and refresh this, you'll see it will always change with whatever color this is. So that is how you use that current color. Now we have I don't know if this is 3 types of colors. Now essentially, you guys, I want you to understand one thing. We only have 3 colors in the world. Okay, in the world is a bad word, but we only have 3 colors, and that is red, green, and blue. So if I come here to this element, I can give my RGB value, because you only have 3 colors, R, G, and B. White is not a color, and black is also not a color. So the only colors that we have, the only colors that we have in art are red, green, and blue. Red, green, and blue are the only colors that we have. So white is usually achieved by putting all of these colors together. So red is 255. All these colors go all the way from 0 to 255. Green 255, and then blue 255. So when you have 255, 255, 255, you are mixing all the colors together, and as a consequence, you'll get white. So when I refresh this, we will get a white color, of which definitely you cannot see it here because our page is also white in color. Now, black is usually achieved by removing all the colors. So if you remove red, removing red means putting a 0 there, and then you also remove green, you put a 0 there, and then you also remove blue, you put a 0 there. Then you've made a black color. So when I refresh that, you can see that it's a black color, and it is because we've removed red, green, and blue. So in our colors, in the absence of red and green, we get, in the absence of green and blue, we get our red. In the absence of these, maybe red and blue, we get our green. You get the idea. You can see it is just messing up with those values, and we get whatever color we want. So I know you guys are probably now confused that maybe I've told you that we only have 3 colors in the world, and yet we've used here orange, red, pink, cyan, and essentially all the other colors are just made by combining, by messing around with the value of the red, the green, and the blue inside our color palette or something. So for example, if I come here and put here from 255 to 250, you can see I'm already making some new color over here. If I come, for example, here and put this to 205, you can see this color is changing. And maybe if I come here and maybe put this to something like 25, you can see the color is completely changing. You can see we've made this color that is yellowish looking by putting 250 for the red, 205 for the green, and 25 for the blue. So when I come and refresh it here, you can see I'm getting that color over there. So that is essentially how the color system works. We only have 3 colors: the red, the green, and the blue. So all the other colors are made by just varying the amount of red, green, and blue inside of this RGB thing over here. So you can see we've varied the amount of red, we varied the amount of green, and we varied the amount of blue. And as a result, we've made this yellow over here. I don't know if this is yellow. I'm not good with colors, but you can see by just playing around with this, we've made that. I hope that makes sense. Now, let me just remove all the colors. And I remember I've told you that black is not a color. The only way we get black is if we remove all the colors in a place. So let me just show you that here. If I remove the red, I remove the green, and I remove this blue, you can see I'm getting a black. So there is something called the grayscale family. Essentially, we can add an anchor to whatever RGB value we've made, and when we add our anchor, it messes around with the opacity of that particular color that we've created. So this opacity goes from 0 all the way to 1. So from 0 all the way to 1, where 1 is the biggest value, and it means that the element is opaque, we cannot see through it. So if I just come here and put a 0.5, then you will see a certain shade of black over here. You can see we are getting that grayish color being made over there. And essentially that is it with our RGB. So if I even come here and put, let's say, my 255, I don't know what color we will make when we are making a blue color. So this is color blue with some opacity. You can see with some opacity because of this 0.5 over here. And if I put this 0, it means that it is completely transparent. And when I refresh that, you can see it is completely transparent. Actually, you are seeing through. We've not removed the element. The element is there, but because we've put a 0 here, it is completely transparent, on so that you are not even seeing it. We are actually seeing the page instead of seeing that particular element. So let me just refresh, go back to what I have there. And if I put a 0.2, maybe that will explain better. You can see our transparency value is really working its way to 0 over there. And when I refresh that, you can see it is even more transparent, this shade of bluish over here. And you can use it to create a box shadow effect if you are not good with box shadows or something. But I will get to box shadows. I'll teach you how to do box shadows when you get there. Maybe that is in the next week's session. So maybe if we add here a 255, I don't know what color we will be making. Oh, 355 is not a value. 255, I don't know what color we will be making, but it is this weird looking color. Let me just bring my opacity to something like 0.6 to see what color we've made. And it is that pinkish color. And you can see we've made that pinkish color by having 255 value for the red, 0 for the green, and 255 for the blue. And for the opacity that you're seeing here, it is because of this 0.6 over here. So I don't want us to go beyond this point, because I think you guys are very tired, and it's evening, and maybe it's for most of you it's your me time or something. Next week we'll pick up from the concept of colors, and we'll be finishing up CSS next week, and we'll go through colors, box shadows, and doing more global resets, because you can see, for example, right now this font is not exciting at all, but next week we'll pick up from here, and we will look at how to make this a bit different and a bit more exciting. So I hope that I hope to see you guys next week, so that we work on this, and we also work on Flexbox and Gridbox. They're a bit challenging topics, but with time, you become a master in them. So from next week we'll pick up from hexadecimal colors as we go on and go forth. So I think that is all from me today. Let me invite Brian Kemboi to see the next step. So Brian, please welcome, who is also our web development lead in CSK. Brian, welcome.
Okay, that was a nice session at home. So am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you so much, Otoma, for the session. So the session, I think, was one of the best sessions, because we've touched on so many things, from how people can, how our attendees can be able to start up with from CSS, and digging them with HTML, because this was the things also we tried to cover last week. So for anyone who was not available, I think this was a good moment for them also to have a recap on that. And we've also taken us through the box model, and you've tried to explain everything in detail in the way in which a beginner can be able to understand. So thank you so much, Otoma. Otoma was our previous web development lead, and you've really done something that can be able now to teach others as well. So also in our midst we have Dennis Kaduri. Now we have Frisia Njoki. We have up to almost 11 attendees. So I think we're still having a challenge with our attendees joining the session. And I will be also communicating on a way on which we'll be having more attendees joining our event, because in our WhatsApp group we have up to more than 250 attendees. So we'll try as much as